It started in the rain. Not the polite drizzle that makes streets glisten. Not the romantic cinematic kind that appears in old movies. This was a cold, sharp rain that cut through your jacket and your thoughts alike. The kind of rain that whispers secrets you'd rather not hear. I was standing in the ruins of Chateau Montferrand, a manor in northern France, forgotten by maps and memory. Once it had been magnificent, its stone towers clawing at the sky, gargoyles perched like sentries, gardens sprawling into infinity. Now it was nothing more than a skeleton. Roof gone, windows shattered, staircases collapsed, only the bones of walls remained, blackened by fire, scarred by artillery. And there, wedged between a broken beam and the rubble of the Grand Library, was something that shouldn't have survived. A leather-bound diary, cracked and soaked, yet somehow intact. I picked it up with gloves, careful. Old things like this have a way of cutting you. Not with knives, but with stories. And this one had a story. Who was the captain? Henri Delacroix, born 1914 in Lyon, France. By the time the war reached its bloody peak, he was 31, a captain in the 12th Infantry Battalion of the French Army. But calling him a soldier is misleading. Henri was a thinker, a planner, a man who scribbled diagrams of city streets, sketches of enemy formations, and notes on local towns in the margins of maps. The diary wasn't just words. It was a map of Henri's mind. He wrote about tactics, yes, but also about the people he met, the choices he made, and the nights he spent staring at ceilings of cold barracks, wondering if what he was doing was right. His handwriting was precise, almost obsessive, looping letters carefully formed. You could tell this was a man who believed in order, in logic, in structure, until war shattered it. The manor before the fall. Chateau Montferrand had been more than a home. For the Delacroix family, it was a fortress, a symbol of wealth and lineage. During the early years of the German occupation, it became a temporary command post. From the diary, you could almost smell the smoke of the fireplaces, see officers' polished boots clicking across marble floors, hear the faint clatter of typewriters and telegraphs. Henri wrote of nights when the bombs fell, first near the manor, then closer. He described the panic of servants, the hasty evacuation of the library, and the way the portraits seemed to watch the chaos. He never mentioned his own fear directly, only the details. The sound of shattering glass, the way splintered beams fell across the hall, the trembling of the chandeliers. The diary hinted at something darker, resistance work. Secret messages hidden in books, in paintings, in the folds of furniture. A network of spies, some French, some Allied, all risking their lives beneath the elegant veneer of the manor. Henri was at the center, orchestrating moves like a chess master, yet always aware of the cost. Discovery of the diary. I found it months later, on a gray morning. The manor had been abandoned for decades. Local children whispered it was haunted. Travelers avoided it. But curiosity, that dangerous little itch, brought me there. I remember brushing off the mud, opening the diary, and immediately being swallowed by Henri's world. October 3rd, 1942. Today I received word that the Germans suspect the local blacksmith. I fear for him, but orders are clear. If one life is risked, 100 more may survive. I hope I have the courage to act. The words jumped off the page. You could hear the hesitation, the fear, the calculation. Henri wasn't a hero in the usual sense. He was a man forced to choose over and over between what was safe, what was right, and what would matter in the end. The manor after the bombing. Later entries were more desperate. March 17th, 1943. The manor is no longer safe. Artillery has reduced the West Wing to rubble. I've hidden the most sensitive papers. If I do not survive the night, perhaps someone will find them. And then the diary paused for months,
Letters missing, pages soaked or burned. Henri's handwriting became erratic, lines crossing margins, diagrams of escape routes, coded symbols, arrows pointing to secret caches in the cellar. It was clear he had been planning for survival, not just his own, but the lives of those under his command, the innocent civilians in nearby villages, and the Allied networks depending on him. The emotional impact. Holding the diary, I felt the weight of time, of lives lived and lost, of decisions made in silence. Henri's voice, though faded, was alive. His words created tension in my chest, like standing at the edge of a battlefield. You didn't need to see the Germans or the bombs. You felt the stakes, the strategy, and the moral calculus.
Some passages made me laugh, dry, ironic, almost bitter humor. Others made me pause, staring at the ceiling of the ruined library, imagining Henri hiding beneath splintered beams, quill in hand, penning secrets that could cost him everything. Legacy of the diary. This was more than a personal story. It was a window into how individuals, quietly and courageously, shaped the war without fanfare. Henri Delacroix didn't make headlines. He didn't get medals. But the diary suggested he influenced decisions at higher levels, sometimes by simply knowing when to act, when to write, when to hide. And for me, as the finder, it meant something else. A reminder that history isn't just battles and numbers. It's choices, calculations, silent bravery that never sought applause. The morning the bombs fell, Henri Delacroix woke to a sound he would never forget. It wasn't a scream, nor an explosion at first. It was a low rumble, like the earth itself had begun to move. Dust trickled down the walls, a warning in slow motion. He grabbed the diary, tucked it under his arm, and sprinted through hallways he had memorized in childhood. Every corridor, every staircase had a memory, a photograph, a rug, a secret panel. The manor was a maze, elegant and cruel. Outside, the artillery shells began to land. Windows shattered, roof tiles peeled away. Trees around the estate bent like reeds in a storm. Henri paused, listening. He had a choice: hide and survive, or run to the West Wing to rescue sensitive documents. The diaries, coded maps, letters from Allied contacts, all of it could alter the course of resistance networks across France. He ran. The West Wing was a ruin already. Smoke choked the halls. Charred furniture lay scattered like debris from a collapsed life. Henri's boots crunched on broken plaster and shards of glass. There, in a corner, under a fallen bookshelf, were the papers. He grabbed them, stuffing them into a canvas satchel. One wrong step and a burning beam could crush him, but he moved like a shadow, quick, precise, calculated. The secret within the pages. Back in a hidden cellar, Henri spread out the papers. The diary wasn't just personal reflection, it was a tactical playbook. He had marked locations where German officers slept, patrol routes, hidden caches of ammunition, and even notes on saboteur operations in the nearby villages. Each entry was layered, some for human eyes, some in cipher only a few could read. One passage stood out. The manor is no longer just a house. It is a shield. If they find me here, the network dies. But if I leave, I might survive, but so will they. I must act like the manor itself is alive. Every door a trap, every corridor a lesson. Henri wasn't just a captain. He was a strategist, weaving psychology into warfare. He understood that fear could be a weapon as sharp as any rifle.
by controlling the manor's collapse, by letting certain areas burn while others remained intact, he could mislead the Germans, delay their progress, and save lives. The bombing. The first shell tore through the library. Henri barely rolled out of the way. Dust and soot coated his face. He coughed, eyes stinging, lungs burning. Another shell hit the east wing. Flames licked the ceiling. The manor shuddered with every impact. Henri could hear the German soldiers shouting outside, their voices distorted by wind and distance. He checked his satchel. Papers safe. Then, using a set of hidden tunnels he had discovered months earlier, he began moving deeper into the manor's foundations. These tunnels were narrow, barely 2 feet wide, and led to the gardens, the stables, and finally the nearby forest. As he crawled, Henri paused to listen. Footsteps above. German boots. They were searching systematically. But the manor was a trap of his design. Collapse here, fire there, the enemy moved blindly into zones he had calculated weeks in advance.
The escape. Hours later, Henri emerged into the snow-drenched forest. The manor behind him was a skeleton of smoke and fire, blackened beams jutting into the gray sky. He had survived, but just barely. He didn't look back. There was no time for reflection. Resistance members in nearby towns were waiting for updates, for instructions, for hope. He moved like a ghost, following pre-planned routes. Each safe house had been mapped, each contact notified in advance. No mistakes. Henri knew that one slip could mean death, or worse, the destruction of everything he had worked for. The diary remains. What he didn't know was that decades later, that diary would survive, hidden beneath a fallen beam in the ruined manor. The pages soaked in smoke, rain, and dust, but still legible, still powerful. A record of bravery, strategy, and moral courage that transcended time. Each entry revealed not just what Henri did, but why. Decisions that seemed reckless in the moment were deliberate. Each move, each calculation, was a demonstration of asymmetric warfare, how one mind could manipulate fear, chaos, and timing to control an entire battlefield. The hidden messages. Some entries were easy to read. Others required decoding. Henri had left a trail of ciphers and codes, each pointing to hidden stashes, safe houses, or messages for the Allies. One map, folded inside the diary, marked locations of captured German plans that could alter the understanding of operations in northern France. Every line, every arrow, every mark matters, he had written. If found, understand intent. Do not trust surface meaning. The diary wasn't just a record. It was a test, a puzzle, a legacy left to those who could read between the lines. The emotional weight. Reading it, I felt the weight of Henri's choices. Each decision balanced life and death, morality and necessity. You could feel the terror he suppressed, the fear he disguised with calculation. His was not the glory of headline victories, but the quiet heroism of survival and strategy. It was personal. It was devastating. And yet, somehow, it was elegant. Comment below if you've ever held a piece of history that made you feel like a silent witness to someone else's courage. Decades later, the manor stood as a hushed skeleton of its former grandeur. Ivy crawled over shattered walls, birds nested in the broken gables, and the wind whistled through windows with missing panes. No one had set foot inside for nearly 50 years, not willingly, at least. That's when Dr. Eliza Hartman arrived, archaeologist, historian, and part-time adventurer, a woman who loved forgotten stories more than comfortable offices. She had heard rumors about the manor, bombed in 1944, abandoned, rumored to house hidden treasures of wartime intelligence. But it was the whisper of a diary that had drawn her. Her boots crunched against frost-coated gravel as she approached the front entrance. She paused, eyes scanning the ruins. The manor seemed almost alive, breathing history through its splintered bones. She lifted her camera, snapping photos of charred walls and collapsed staircases.
each click echoing softly across the empty halls.
The diary in the rubble. Beneath a collapsed section of the library floor, Eliza's gloved fingers brushed something hard and rectangular. Dust billowed up. Heart racing, she pulled it free. A leather-bound book, scorched at the edges, the spine cracked, pages swollen from decades of moisture. The diary was Henri Delacroix's. Every page smelled of smoke and time. Faint traces of ink still visible. She opened it carefully. On the first page, Henri had written, "If someone reads this, know that every decision carried a weight I could not share. Every action calculated. Every choice a question of life or death." Eliza's pulse quickened. She could almost hear Henri's voice whispering through the ink, guiding her through history hidden for generations. Secrets unveiled. As she turned pages, the diary revealed more than personal reflection. It contained sketches of the manor, maps of German patrol routes, coded messages to the French resistance, and notes on sabotaging supply lines. Each line carried tension, urgency, and intelligence that could still impress modern historians. One entry stood out. "We cannot fight the world in open battle, but we can manipulate its rhythm. Fire where chaos benefits us, delay where patience saves lives. The manor is our instrument." Eliza realized that Henri had transformed a building into a tactical weapon. Every hallway, every collapsed beam, every scorched wall had been intentional, a part of a broader strategy to confuse, trap, and destroy the enemy. The emotional weight of discovery. Eliza sat in the debris, flipping pages slowly. She imagined Henri crawling through collapsed hallways, carrying messages, hiding secrets, calculating outcomes under fire. Fear must have been constant, but it was always paired with precision. She could feel his heartbeat in every decision. The diary was a portal to that December morning in 1944, to the terror, brilliance, and moral ambiguity of war. It was more than a historical document. It was a meditation on courage, consequence, and human ingenuity. The legacy of the diary. By the time Eliza left the manor, the diary was carefully packed in archival sleeves. She couldn't help but smile, knowing that she had touched something that had survived decades of decay, war, and secrecy. Back at her lab, she began decoding the ciphers, comparing sketches to historical maps, and cross-referencing German patrol routes with Allied reports. Henri's work wasn't just story, it was intelligence. It illuminated decisions, tactics, and the lived experience of someone operating beyond the rules, yet entirely within the necessity of survival. It was a reminder that sometimes history isn't in books, medals, or monuments. It's hidden in quiet corners, in forgotten diaries, waiting for someone patient enough to listen.
Back in her lab, Eliza spread the diary across a long oak table, careful not to tear the brittle pages. Each sentence was a breadcrumb into Henri Delacroix's mind, a captain trapped between duty and conscience, war and morality. She noticed patterns immediately. Henri didn't just record movements, he analyzed human behavior, enemy reactions, civilian choices, even the hesitation of his own soldiers. There were diagrams of ambush points, hidden exits in the manor, and notes on booby traps designed not to kill indiscriminately, but to channel chaos toward strategic outcomes. One page was almost poetic. The enemy fears what they cannot see. They obey orders blindly. In a single stroke, one man can dictate their path, not by firepower, but by foresight. Eliza realized the implications. Henri's diary was more than personal reflection. It was a tactical manual disguised as memoir. His strategies could have been applied anywhere, not just in that Belgian manor, not just in 1944. It was asymmetric warfare before the term existed. Rewriting history. She began cross-referencing Henri's diary with Allied and German records. The manor, long dismissed as a minor skirmish site, revealed itself as a pivotal point in local intelligence operations. Small Allied units had delayed entire German patrols,
preventing reinforcements from reaching the front, all thanks to the strategic genius of a single, overlooked captain. Back in her lab, Eliza spread the diary across a long oak table, careful not to tear the brittle pages. Each sentence was a breadcrumb into Henri Delacroix's mind, a captain trapped between duty and conscience, war and morality. She noticed patterns immediately. Henri didn't just record movements, he analyzed human behavior, enemy reactions, civilian choices, even the hesitation of his own soldiers. There were diagrams of ambush points, hidden exits in the manor, and notes on booby traps designed not to kill indiscriminately, but to channel chaos towards strategic outcomes. One page was almost poetic. The enemy fears what they cannot see. They obey orders blindly. In a single stroke, one man can dictate their path, not by firepower, but by foresight. Eliza realized the implications. Henri's diary was more than personal reflection. It was a tactical manual disguised as memoir. His strategies could have been applied anywhere, not just in that Belgian manor, not just in 1944. It was asymmetric warfare before the term existed. Rewriting history. She began cross-referencing Henri's diary with Allied and German records. The manor, long dismissed as a minor skirmish site, revealed itself as a pivotal point in local intelligence operations. Small Allied units had delayed entire German patrols, preventing reinforcements from reaching the front, all thanks to the strategic genius of a single overlooked captain. Reports matched. German patrols had been disoriented, supply lines slowed, and local resistance aided in ways historians had only vaguely documented. The diary filled in gaps, explaining sudden retreats, unrecorded explosions, and mysterious ambushes previously attributed to luck. Eliza marveled at how a single individual, acting quietly, had shifted events subtly but significantly. The diary wasn't just historical trivia, it was a tactical manual disguised as memoir. His strategies could have been applied anywhere, not just in that Belgian manor, not just in 1944. It was asymmetric warfare before the term existed. Moral dilemmas. But Henri's diary wasn't all triumph. Page after page revealed moments of doubt, ethical wrestling, and choices that weighed heavily on him. Civilians had been endangered, soldiers had been pushed beyond limits, and Henri himself had skirted rules of engagement repeatedly, making unilateral decisions that could have ended in disaster. Eliza paused over one particularly haunting entry. "I ordered the barricade. I knew children might be inside, but the line held. The village survived, and the cost was acceptable. I cannot unsee their fear." The diary reminded her, and would remind anyone reading, that war is not clean. Even tactical brilliance carries human cost. And yet in Henri's case, careful planning, observation, and restraint minimized unnecessary loss. Public reveal. Eliza knew she held something rare, something that could shift modern understanding of minor World War II engagements. With careful planning, she prepared a report for publication. She included photographs, transcribed entries, maps, and diagrams. It wasn't sensationalized, it was truthful, detailed, and immersive.
When it went live, the historical community reacted immediately. Scholars debated the diary's interpretations, questioned previously accepted narratives, and marveled at the ingenuity of a single officer operating in isolation. Social media and forums lit up with discussions, amateur historians exploring the manor's layout using satellite images, reenactors trying to replicate Henri's strategic thinking. Eliza received emails, calls, even invitations to speak at conferences. She realized that history, when touched personally, could captivate as powerfully as fiction, and Henri Delacroix, once a name lost in a rubble-strewn manor, became a quiet legend, a symbol of intellect, courage, and moral complexity. The legacy. For Eliza, the diary was more than a discovery. It was a bridge between past and present, war and peace, human error and calculated genius. And for the world, it was a reminder. History isn't just recorded in battles and borders, but in the small, deliberate acts of people who dared to think differently. Henri's voice, carried across decades through ink and paper, reminded everyone who read it that courage is not always loud, heroism is not always public, and history can sometimes be rewritten by those who dared to act when rules fell silent. As the days turned into weeks, Eliza found herself immersed not just in the diary's strategy, but in Henri Delacroix himself. Page after page, she traced the life of a man who had once walked those halls, who had made impossible choices beneath ceilings now reduced to rubble. Henri was not born a soldier. He grew up in Lyon, France, the son of a school teacher and a blacksmith. His youth was quiet, structured, punctuated by the clanging rhythm of the smithy and the soft scratch of chalk on slate. He was fascinated by mechanics, by maps, by systems. Every small puzzle, every hidden mechanism, every sequence of events intrigued him. That curiosity would later define his military decisions. Before the war, before the world tore itself apart in 1939, Henri had ambitions of architecture. He studied buildings, noting how walls bore weight, how corridors channeled movement, how stairways controlled flow. In some ways, the manor he would later defend was a blueprint in his mind, a living puzzle he could manipulate. When the war reached France, Henri enlisted not out of patriotism alone, but out of a desire to apply logic to chaos. He believed that intelligence, careful planning, and observation could reduce loss of life, even in combat. His diary reveals this philosophy early. War is brute force dressed in order, but order can be broken, reshaped. If one understands patterns, one can guide outcomes without unnecessary bloodshed. The manor's last days. The manor itself had once been a grand estate, surrounded by gardens and fountains. By 1944, it was partially abandoned, its walls riddled with shrapnel and scorched from aerial bombing. Henri and his unit were ordered to hold the building temporarily, using it as a staging point for reconnaissance and small-scale resistance support. He described every creaking floorboard, every shutter, every crack in the plaster as if he were mapping a chessboard. Every nook became a potential hiding spot, every stair a line of defense. And when the bombing began, the manor transformed from a simple billet into a fortress of ingenuity.
The diary captures the tension perfectly. The sky is red with fire. Windows shatter like brittle teeth. Each blast moves through the hallways with precision. We are not huddled, we are calculated. Every step we take is measured. One misstep and the line is broken. But if we hold, the enemy cannot take the road to Verdun. Moral complexity. What set Henri apart was the diary's honesty. He never glamorized violence, never pretended war was clean. One entry describes civilians trapped nearby, their fear almost tangible. Children in the garden. I cannot shield them entirely. I can only redirect danger. The enemy will take the path I force upon them. Guilt tastes bitter, but necessary. History may never forgive, but survival demands calculation. Henri's reflections showed a mind constantly balancing ethics against survival, a thread that made the diary far more than a tactical manual. Discovery's personal impact. For Eliza, the diary became a mirror. She saw in Henri a blend of courage and intellect, a willingness to act when conventional rules demanded inaction. It forced her to question her own assumptions about leadership, risk, and responsibility. She realized that history is full of unrecorded acts, decisions made quietly, invisibly, that ripple outward, shaping outcomes without recognition. Her emotional connection deepened when she found a final note in the diary, written in shaky ink. If these words survive, let them guide one. Not for glory, not for medals, but for the careful shaping of chaos. One man, one choice, one calculated step at a time. It was both a challenge and a comfort. Henri had trusted that someone, decades later, would read, understand, and learn, bringing history to light. Eliza decided the diary could not remain hidden. She meticulously digitized every page, preserving marginal notes, diagrams, even the stains and smudges that told their own story. Historians, military scholars, and enthusiasts were invited to analyze it. Workshops were held to discuss Henri's asymmetric tactics, the moral dilemmas of lone decision-making, and the importance of initiative in war. Comment below if you think you could make split-second life-or-death decisions like Henri. Could you hold the line while weighing every human cost? Once Henri Delacroix's diary was out in the open, the impact was immediate, though subtle at first. Military historians pored over the diagrams of the manor, tracing escape routes, choke points, and firing sequences. The lessons weren't about brute force. They were about calculation, patience, and human intuition. One professor at the Sorbonne remarked, "Delacroix's notes show that a single mind, observing patterns and applying logic, can create outcomes that seem impossible to brute strength alone. It's chess, not checkers." Modern military lessons. The diary became part of a study on asymmetric engagement, tactics where small units or even a single operative can influence a larger force. Henri's precise observations, his emphasis on angles, timing, and psychological manipulation became case studies. Officers in training were asked, how would you block a column with minimal exposure? How do you predict human behavior in chaos? Could you achieve maximum impact with minimum resources? In the US, Fort Sill incorporated excerpts into artillery courses. At Sandhurst in the UK, instructors used the diary to teach unconventional urban defense techniques. And in small NATO workshops, officers debated the moral complexities Henri recorded, the balance of civilian safety against military necessity.
The human cost. Despite the technical brilliance, the diary never hid the human element, and rewrote about men who froze, who doubted, who begged for mercy. There were accounts of soldiers making mistakes that cost lives. Every success carried weight, every victory a shadow. Courage alone is not enough, he wrote. Understanding is survival. Miscalculation is death. Every decision echoes far beyond the room where it's made. Eliza often paused while reading, imagining herself in the manor's icy halls, hearing the distant thrum of artillery, feeling the tension in the air. She could almost see the faces of soldiers frozen mid-step, caught between orders and instinct, uncovering hidden resistance. But the diary held more than battlefield lessons. Henri had secretly assisted French resistance fighters, using the manor as a temporary safe house. There were coded entries, small sketches showing supply drops, hidden tunnels, and messages left for locals. One page, nearly illegible, read, "If anyone ever finds this, know we did not fight only for borders or flags. We fought to give people a chance to live, even when survival seemed impossible." Some of the names are lost, but the choices remain. It was a poignant reminder. Heroism isn't always about medals or recognition. Often it's about quiet decisions made in the shadows. The diary's discovery sparked an amateur historian movement. Other forgotten diaries, letters, and maps emerged from bombed-out estates across Europe. She documented them, connecting stories of courage that had never reached the textbooks. Through social media, blogs, and YouTube videos, the diary reached thousands. Comments poured in. This makes me rethink everything I thought I knew about war. The moral choices are terrifying. How would I have acted? This is like reading the mind of a chess grandmaster in a life-or-death game. The diary had transcended time, educating and inspiring people nearly 80 years after the fact. The ghosts of the manor. Walking through the ruins months later, Eliza could almost feel Henri's presence. Every broken floorboard, every collapsed wall whispered strategy and courage. She imagined him moving through the shadows, calculating angles, protecting his men, and silently recording the lessons no one would read for decades.
Sometimes, she wrote in her own notes, history isn't just recorded. It waits, hidden, until someone brave enough to look decides to learn. The diary, she realized, wasn't just a story of war. It was a story of human intelligence, empathy, and resilience. A testament to the fact that even amid destruction, careful thought and quiet courage could leave a legacy that outlasted bombs, bullets, and time itself. Years passed. The diary that had once been hidden under the floorboards of an abandoned French manor had now traveled across continents, translated into a dozen languages, featured in documentaries, podcasts, and classrooms. But for Eliza Morin, its weight never faded. She often said, "It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the silence it broke." The ceremony. In 2025, on the 80th anniversary of the war's end, France organized a small ceremony at the ruins of Mimoyek, the same cliffs where Germany's secret long-range gun once threatened London. Historians gathered, not to celebrate destruction, but to remember humanity's determination to think, build, and resist. A small podium stood before the fractured walls. Eliza approached with trembling hands, holding Henry's diary, now encased in glass. The air was calm. The sea below whispered softly against the rocks. Cameras flashed, but she spoke quietly, her voice steady. This diary was written by a man who fought with reason, not rage. He believed that even in war, intelligence is the final defense against madness. Henry Delacroix didn't build a weapon. He built understanding and left it for us. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. A message from the past. Later, as the ceremony ended, a veteran approached Eliza, one of the few survivors who had fought in that same region. His voice was fragile but sincere. "We thought no one would remember," he said, his eyes shining. "But now I see. We were never forgotten." Eliza smiled gently, resting her hand on the glass case. "You were remembered. It just took the world a little time to listen." The final page. That night she returned alone to the manor. Moonlight poured through broken beams, painting silver stripes across the stone floor. She placed the diary where she had found it, in the hollow under the floorboards, not to hide it, but to let it rest. A single candle flickered beside it, casting soft shadows over the words Henry had written long ago. If you are reading this, know that knowledge is our only lasting weapon. Time will bury men and machines, but never understanding. Eliza closed the book slowly. The fade out. Outside, the wind moved gently through the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, faint, echoing through the valley like a heartbeat from the past. The war was long over. The gun never fired, but the mind that built it, the courage that resisted it, and the diary that remembered it, those became immortal. As dawn broke over the French cliffs, sunlight spilled across the sea, reflecting off the old steel fragments buried in the sand. Each glint was like a tiny memory, reminding the world of a simple truth. Ideas outlast weapons. Knowledge outlasts war. And silence will always remember those who thought instead of destroyed.